Hi, my name is Stephen Davis, and I want to talk about slavery. With Juneteenth being here and all that, slavery is on every person's mind. But I want to talk about some of that slavery that not a lot of people know about, like white slavery that happened during the 1600s, and the slavery that's still going on all across the world today. Now, as we know, when it comes to the media, they like to put forth one specific message.
Here's another problem impacting Black people and other people of color: systemic racism.
This is the racism that has been normalized within all the systems in which we engage in.
Special correspondent Fred DeSam Lazaro reports on a new book that examines what we didn't know about George Floyd's life and America's struggle with systemic racism.
Within days of his murder on May 25th, 2020, George Floyd became an internationally recognizable figure.
Black children grow up knowing their whole American history, that the majority of the American history that we live today is of Black people being slaves.
They only put forth one narrative and one narrative only: that Blacks had it bad when it came to slavery. Actually, there were many races that were enslaved in North America, especially slaves that were prior to Black Africans' arrival. As we know, the only reason this is to further divide America. They're trying to make it seem like that Blacks only ever had it wrong, only ever had it bad, that Blacks were the only ones that were targeted in North America. That is completely false. Many white slaves were used as chattel, coming from Britain, coming from Ireland, coming from Germany, many parts of the world. The division is meant to cause discontentment within the Black community and to make it seem like we are always ever targeted. We're the only ones that the establishment and the elites are trying to keep downtrodden. So much so that this repetitious narrative is causing a downfall within the Black community and keeping us in this perpetual state of victimhood, of grievance and oppression.
But this also is a reminder that we are living in a country that has truly for a long time brutalized African Americans, from slavery to lynching to Jim Crow, to mass incarceration, and now to police brutality.
The reason I want to talk about white slavery, and the reason I think it's important to shine a light on what's really going on the forgotten history that people seem to ignore when it comes to the formation of the United States of America and the atrocities every race had to suffer when it comes to North America. You see, from the time period of 1620 to about 1775, over 300,000 Brits sold themselves into indentured servitude. Now, some may say, oh, at least they had the opportunity to sell themselves instead of being taken as slaves. Not so much. Hold fast. See, when it came to them selling themselves into indentured servitude, they were still treated as chattel slaves. What's even more interesting is that these were just the volunteers. There were many that were kidnapped. Right? There are many that were sold against their will to take that dangerous trip across the seas. As a matter of fact, kidnapping was so widespread that some estimate that at least 10,000 people were kidnapped a year and sent overseas. Anyone who was considered undesirable in Britain at that time were swept up, swept off the streets, and taken to these ships and shipped to Virginia. Many of these white slaves worked side by side with Black slaves. They would oftentimes form bonds. They would run away together, rebel together. It wasn't until 1676, after the Bacon Rebellion, in which white and Black slaves came together to rebel against their overlords, did the white elite in Virginia decide that we need to put a stop to this. We need to put a stop to these uprisings, these rebellions in which white and black slaves come together and rise up against us. So what we have to do is slightly elevate the status of white slaves to make it seem like they are better than these black slaves. So they started instituting racism and telling these white slaves that you are slightly better than these black Africans. So what they would do is they would strip the rights from black Africans and slightly elevate the rights of white slaves. Then they would segregate them. They would segregate their eating times. They would segregate their housing. They would give these white slaves the opportunity to have corn and money and a gun and land after their term of chattel slavery had ended. All of this was just to drive a wedge between the two races for the simple fact of keeping them from bonding together and uprising together against the elite. It had nothing to do with racism and everything to do with the preservation of power. And it's quite significant because you see that still today. The elite want to keep us at war with each other, white versus black, for the simple fact of keeping us from coming together and going against the powers that be.
No, you're always going to be racist, actually. So even when you're on your path to trying to figure out how to be a better human being, because I believe that white people are born into not being human.
Oftentimes, Irish people were looked upon as worse and as more degenerate than African slaves. People from Germany were bamboozled and hoodwinked to come to North America for a chance at the new life. Parents from Britain would have their children ripped from their hands and told that they're going to have a better life in the new land. Some of the children would die on the way to the new land, and many of them died in the first year after arriving to the new land. They were whipped, they were chained, they were starved, they were beaten to death, treated every bit as bad as any depiction of black Africans. These people were constantly told lies, were constantly manipulated and deceived into taking this journey. Slavery is atrocious. It's a terrible thing. But we have to understand that the slavery going on in this day and age is reminiscent of the slavery that happened to whites, in which they were sold a bill of goods to sell themselves into slavery for the sake of the American dream. When it comes to these cartels, they are utilizing themselves as a travel agency, so to speak, to bring people into the fold, sell themselves into slavery for the American dream. And they are tagged and they are to pay sums of money, and they will pay this until their debt is paid. But of course, we know that they will never be able to pay it off. Just like the white indentured servants in the 1600s, a lot of these slaves, when it comes to these cartels, are used as drug mules. And there's a rather despicable saying that you can sell drugs one time, but you can sell a child over and over and over again. This just shows the despicable evil of these individuals who wish to exploit a person's need or desire to become better, for more, for a better chance at the American dream. So don't get me wrong, slavery in any form, in any fashion, especially the slavery that happened during the time of black slaves, was absolutely wrong. But we can't forget what happened when it came to white slaves. We can't forget about the slavery that happens in Arab countries still today. We can't forget about the slavery that happens in China or with the cartels. We can't forget about sex slavery that still happens in North America. All slavery is evil. What happened in the past was evil, but it's just that. In the past, let's deal with what's going on right now in this current time while we can still do something about it. We have to make a stand now for what's happening in the present.